Hi everybody, this is our very first lesson on Algebra 1 on algebraic expressions. So welcome if you are new here. I'd like to give something new a try, so let's just see how this goes. So we're going to go ahead and first define the following then, which is an algebraic expression. So we say the following right here. An algebraic expression is a combination of constants, variables, and algebraic operations. So below, I gave some examples of what are some examples of algebraic expressions. When we talk about constants, we're talking about like numbers, 5, 10, 20, 15, -4, and that kind of stuff. So like a numerical value. Whereas if I say variable, that means something like, say, x or y or z, some sort of letter that represents some sort of number. And we also use operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplying, dividing, and maybe sometimes even square or square root or exponents. So in the first case, you can see you have 5 plus 2 times x squared. That's how you would actually say it if you were to just verbally write it out, say it out loud. The next one, we would say a times x minus by plus c. The next one after that, 7 to the 4th power. And yeah, even though there are no I guess multiplication signs or division sign, that is still considered an expression. Not much of an algebraic one because you're missing the variable, but still it falls into this category because you have the other stuff in there. There's also 7 plus 7, which works, and that simplifies out to be 14 if you want to. So all that kind of works out. Note, everything that I've been using so far, follows the rules of having a constant, variables, and or algebraic expressions. Next one, we can read that as the negative of the square root of x. And if you're not familiar with square root, you're definitely going to get used to it in a while too. And finally, for this last one, we would say that it's 5 plus x in parentheses to the 3rd power. So that parentheses is going to come in handy. So you're going to see that in the future as well. Okay, so let's get into some examples of where you're going to write out the algebraic expression for each sentence. So literally, just as it says right there, I'm going to go ahead and give you a sentence, and your job is to write out what the algebraic expression is going to be, just kind of like above. The first one is a number times 5 increase by 4. So if I just read it from left to right, you can kind of see what you're going up against, right? A number, they didn't verify as to what kind of number, so that's where the variable comes in. We can usually denote that as x, or you want to use y or m or z, whatever works. So x multiplied by, because the word times, and then 5, and then increase by 4. So you can kind of see word for word as to what is what. So then that way we can write out this expression then. So a number, which is going to be referred to x, multiplied by 5 because it's times, and then the 5 is there, and then increase is the word for addition, and then plus 4. Let's look at the next one. 4 decreased by a number squared. So once again, the number, we don't know what it is, so that's where the variable comes in. But if I were to go from left to right, we can say that it's 4 decreased by, so that's a subtraction, by a number, and that number is going to be x, and that number is supposedly going to be squared. So right there, 4 minus x squared would be an example of this algebraic expression. Now, the next one, part C, the square root of the product of two numbers. So once again, those two numbers, we don't know what they are, so we can use the variables for that. So starting off with what's there is this the square root of, so that's square root right there. Now, notice that I did make this a little bit easier to say that it's the square root of in parentheses. So that tells me that what I have is inside the square root. And you can always do that just to make it clear to your audience. The more clear, the better, obviously. So that's why I did it this way. So anyhow, going back, the square root of the product of two numbers. When we say product, we're looking at multiplying. So that means we're going to go ahead and say x multiplied by y. Now, if you're wondering, can I use x times x? Technically, I guess you can, but then we don't know anything about the two numbers, so I prefer to use two different variables if possible. And finally, for the last one, 2/3 of the 4th power of a number. So again, 2/3, that's going to be the fraction 2 divided by 3. Of means usually multiply by, and then the 4th power of a number. So the number being some unknown, we'll go ahead and say the variable is x, and raised to the 4th power then. So 2/3 of the 4th power of a number. Now this right here, be very careful, is not the same thing as 2/3 times x, the whole thing to the 4th power. That's a different expression, and we'll save that for a little bit later on, and hopefully, have you figure out how to actually write something like that. Now, going backwards, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and give you some mathematical expression which you're going to write out as a sentence. And I kind of did it ahead of time just to, save a little bit of space and time also. First one is 4x minus 7. So same as idea before, right? Going from left to right. We're going to go ahead and say 4 times a number. So that's going to represent your 4x. Decrease, so that's going to be your subtraction sign, by 7. So there he goes. The next one, the sum of two numbers squared. So I'm going to look at the sum, right? So that sum means that I'm going to add something. Now, in terms of what that something is, will be two numbers squared. So the two numbers, once again, they're unknown. Normally, we would say x and y, but then we also are told that those numbers are squared. So that's why it's x squared plus y squared. Now the bottom one, part C, this is where it gets a little interesting because you'll note that it's kind of like part B, but not quite the same. This one says x plus y in parentheses squared. So note how I use the quotation to indicate that we have a parentheses. And yes, you can definitely do that. So the square of, and in parentheses, quotation, the sum of two numbered. I guess you can kind of write it the other way too. You can literally say the sum of two numbers and then close the quotation squared, and that would also do the same job. So there's more than one way to write each one of them, so just let you know that that's always going to be the case. Okay, all right, well, thank you so much. I will see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.